'Tis woman's strongest vindication for speaking that the world needs to hear her voice. Anna Julia Cooper wrote those words in 1892. You would think she's speaking about today. White supremacy and patriarchy, by definition, belittles and ignores the voices of Black women. Some of Us Are Brave, a Black woman's radio program, was a corrective to that, centering and airing the voices, views, and experiences of Black women, documenting them and capturing moments in time. The program aired on Pacifica Radio for almost a decade. Many of those voices have been preserved here, and Some of Us Are Brave, interviews and conversations with sisters on life, art, and struggle. Edited by Tandisizwe Shimaringa.
Tech Spicy in the house. Tech Spicy in the house. Can't even get my own stuff together. That's terrible. But at any rate, how y'all doing? How are y'all doing? I am so bad at trying to promote myself. I usually just promote the work. But hold up one second. Let me see if I can do this real quick.
Before Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, or Sandra Bland, there was Oscar Grant.
Yeah.
The current movement against police terror and for accountability and justice can trace its first iterations to this moment, when Oscar Grant was killed by a Bay Area Rapid Transit police officer on January 1st, 2009. Captured on numerous digital devices, Oscar's death would be the first murder prosecution of an on-duty Bay Area police officer. Before that would occur, however, Oscar would be murdered in the media and in the court system. It was a triple murder. No doubt, the murders of Oscar Grant tells this story.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Tandisizwe Shimaringa, and welcome to this week's edition of Rootwork here on Black Liberation Media. So as I was saying, I always have this issue with promoting myself, so I'm trying to do better. And these are some books that I have written. Some of Us Are Brave, a 2-volume set. No Doubt, The Murders of Oscar Grant. And co-written with Deborah Jones, What We Stood For. So just trying to put that out there, because I've been in spaces where I've been asked to speak and people be like, and what else did you do? I was like, It's like, didn't you write a book? Oh, yeah. So I've written some books. Am I trying to sell you a product? You could say that. But, my job is also to inform. So I'm letting you know that there's some books out there that I ain't just pop up here on Black Liberation Media. I ain't new to this. I'm true to this. I've been doing this for a minute. But, yeah. How y'all doing? Hey, Terry. I don't remember seeing you in a minute. Hope you all right. Hey, Leah. We over there on Facebook with the old folks tripping off of was it Game of Thrones? No, House of the Dragon. What I call the Dragon Incest Show. Yeah, and the Game of Thrones world. Hey, Jamon, how are you doing? Hello, Jason. Have I seen you here before? I don't know. What up, reparationists? Yeah, they say that Facebook is for old folks. That's fine. I have built a community at Facebook. I haven't, well, I got some folks over on Instagram, but for the most part, my community is on Facebook. I didn't have a community on Twitter or Threads and ain't gonna get one. But yeah. So that's where my community is. So I be over there on Facebook live tweeting as I watch Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Folks be like, "Shh, I ain't watched it yet." Whatever. I give some context and some context I don't. Mostly I'm just reacting and tweeting. But yeah, at any rate. So on today's show, a comrade of mine, a colleague comrade of mine, Gabriel San Roman, from my days in independent media with Pacifica Radio. He is the author of two books. His most recent book came out last week, 365 Days of Dissent. And I thought it would be good to talk to him about what the book covers. So that's what we're going to do today. Greetings, salam. How are you? AQCF. And I guess you'll let us know in the chat what all that stands for, right? Okay. So yeah, let's get into now. Again, this is another pre-recorded interview. He's not here live. My show next week with Dr. Kenja McCrae should be live. She is a historian in Georgia, and you'll be able to ask her questions if you have any. But today's show is pre-recorded, and yeah, let's get into that now, shall we? San Roman is an award-winning journalist and author. He has investigated political corruption as a reporter for the LA Times, written long-form histories for the late OC Weekly, that's Orange County Weekly, out here in Southern California, and voiced the Subversive Historian radio series on Pacifica Radio. He is also the author of Venceremos, Victor Jara. Is it Jara or Yara?
Hara.
Neither one. Yeah. Victor Hara and the New Chilean Song Movement. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for being on Root Work today.
It's a pleasure being on. Good to be with you, Tandi.
I don't know if you heard that. I started to say, on Some of Us Are Brave.
There you go. Old habits.
Old habits. The Pacifica Connection, man. The Pacifica Connection. And later on, I want to talk to you about your Pacifica Radio sojourn, independent media sojourn. But today, we are talking about your newest book, 365 Days of Dissent, Revolts, Strikes, and Rebel Histories, out from PM Press, out on June 16th. As soon as I saw it, I said, this reminds me of a people's history of the U.S., but more focused on acts of resistance, acts of dissent. That's two different things, you know. It's also not limited to here in the U.S. It goes around the world and looks at various acts of rebel histories and dissent, resistance, etc., around the world. So you start the book off by talking about your grandmother and how that factors into this. Why don't we start with that? Why don't you tell our viewers this story about Abuela that opens the book?
Absolutely. My family is very historically rooted in what's now the U.S. borderlands. I have deep roots in southern New Mexico, Chihuahua, northern state of Mexico, and El Paso is the lodestone of our family. And so my grandmother went to grammar school at an elementary school called Corshane. And this is Texas at the start of the 20th century. And one of the oral histories that's been passed down through generations of my family is that one day at school, my grandmother was learning history, the history of Texas, and the textbook said that Sam Houston defeated the cowardly Mexicans. And my grandmother, being Mexican, took offense to that framing, and she's always had this organic rebel streak in her at an early age that manifested by the impulsive act that she took next, which was to rip that offending page out of the textbook. And of course, she got sent to the principal's office for that. And but it does basically speak to how even in one state like Texas, history is taught. And so when I had to formulate kind of the reason why a book like this is needed, I didn't have to look any further than my own family. And that was just so illustrative of a larger issue within the U.S. in terms of how textbooks, specifically in Texas and elsewhere, do not do a good job of presenting a broader view, do not do a good job of departing from what's been the predominant method of historical instruction, the great man theory, which can be distilled into anything about the founding fathers. And when it comes to Texas, this is a fight that is continuing for decades after that textbook rebellion from my grandmother. And so I had the opportunity to talk about the current governor, Greg Abbott, and a spat from a few years ago where the curriculum in Texas was, there was educators trying to streamline it. And so there was a fight over the word heroic in relation to the Alamo defenders, the Anglo insurrectionists who established Texas as an independent Lone Star Republic.
So you mean, hold on, let me stop you real quick. First of all,
sure.
When your grandmother did this, she was in elementary school or high school?
Grammar school, elementary school.
Grammar school.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're in high school, you're still a child, but you're not an adolescent. You're an adolescent or a youth. Your grandmother was an actual child and ripped this page out of the book.
Yeah. And it's a through line through her life. It's not as if she was affiliated with any organizing in a formal sense, but my family comes from, my mother was raised in a place called Smeltertown. And there's been academic works of history about Smeltertown because there used to be two giant smokestacks in El Paso from Asarco, which was a polluting smelter corporation. And of course, there was a number of strikes, labor strikes there. I don't have to go any further for the strikes part of my history than where my family grew up. It was segregated. Whites lived in El Alto, the upper part, and the Mexicans lived in El Bajo, below. And so when my grandmother became a shopkeeper with a grocery store, whenever the workers at Asarco, who were mostly Mexican workers, miners, they are smelting workers, they basically they were able to keep food on the table because my grandmother would basically operate the store on a credit basis, like pay when you can. You're on strike right now, handle your business and come back to me later. And so it was it's a through line, and she had some early kind of proto-feminist politics. And so it's great to start it, right there at the borderlands in Texas, no further than my own family tree.
And we go from your grandmother's grammar school, elementary school rebellion against the words heroic and cowardly to the 21st century and the exact same fight over the word heroic in Texas.
Yes.
That's great.
Great. I mean, Greg Abbott as governor said, of course, the school children of Texas should learn that, the Alamo, that fight, the Anglos were heroic in that sense. And anything else is blasphemy. It basically blasphemes the enshrined tale of Texas to see the Anglo insurrectionists as anything but heroic. But you have to see this in the context of slavery. And Sam Houston was an enslaver. He was an enslaver, and if you can attach heroic to that, I'd love to see you try.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's crazy. So Okay, your book deals again with acts of resistance, acts of dissent, rebel histories, not just limited to the US, but you deal with indigenous Native Americans, Mexicanos, black folks, Asians, Chinese, Japanese, white workers, coal miners, you Jewish resistance. You mentioned the Warsaw Uprising. So basically, it's really literally from January through December, every day a page out of history where something happened in terms of a rebellion, an act of resistance. In some instances, even not necessarily an act of resistance, but an act of injustice. One thing that caught my eye was the story of Isaac Woodward that you,
Yes.
excuse me, Isaac Woodard that you included in the book. You also included the Molotov cocktail bombing of Malcolm X's home
Hmm.
in the book. I thought that those were interesting choices. I do appreciate them being included so that we don't forget the history. But I just thought it was interesting choices. And I can come back to speak on Isaac Woodard in a moment. But I wanted to ask you, what were some of your favorite stories in the book?
There's so many, but I do tend to gravitate back towards some stories. And just right off the jump of the book, on January 2nd, there's a petition against slavery in by Philadelphia Freemen in the Congress, and obviously there was a previous petition by Quakers who were opposed to slavery in the United States. This is 1799, and then it gets taken up in 1800. It was just so mathematically telling that the vote to basically beat that petition down and then sweep it away, you know, there was one Congress member who voted to see it through. And the original vignette that I had composed, I had thought that the imbalance of the vote, I believe it was like 83-1, would tell the story. But then the editor voice in my head, being a reporter for 20 plus years, told me, no, this vignette is not finished. Go and find out who that one person was who sided with the Philadelphia Freemen. And that extra push to do some more research landed me to the historical figure of George Thatcher, who basically was the sole person to vote in favor of the petition. But as I say, he was not alone, because James Fortin wrote him a letter and said, "You, sir, see us as part of the human race, not as property." And so that's just an example where going the extra mile helps complete the story. And I have to be very economical with my words and how I condense things, because these are vignettes that are point of view, and it's not a traditional history book, because it doesn't have any frontiers besides an emphasis on the United States and a calendar and the days of the calendar. That's the only and the curation too. And so that's how the structure of the book is. So I would call it more of a literary book about history than a history book itself. And so that's one that comes to mind. And I think that I was able to, my previous publication was Venceremos, Victor Jara and the New Chilean Song Movement. I was able to kind of return to that movement of folk singers who were in support of socialist presidency of Salvador Allende. But really, a lot of people will mistakenly believe that the protest movement, the protest song movement, or the revolutionary song movement — I would get reprimanded for calling it protest songs by the players of the day. It's this woman, Violeta Parra, who is the godmother of it. And she's not always seen as the godmother of it, but that's the true history of it. And there's a vignette for her on February 5th, which is a day that's remembered among Chileans and musicians, especially because she was able to transform the countryside folk music into the people songs, in the sense that it reflected the struggles of miners, that it reflected the struggles of the Mapuche indigenous people. But on February 5th, which is the anchor of the story, it's where her life tragically ends. She wrote a song called Thanks Be to Life. In Spanish, it's Gracias a la Vida. But, on that particular day, she died by suicide with a handgun in a tent that was supposed to be this flowering cultural center with her and her children. And, the next day there was a wake at that tent, and politicians came to pay respects. Mourners left bouquets of flowers behind. But what happened was that her son Angel told the press that was gathered there, it's like, it's always the same story. Now that my mother's dead, her value is being recognized. And so I end that vignette by saying, as it turned out, after she died, Gracias a la Vida was one of the most covered songs in Latin America's songbook. So, there's an opportunity to get at the root of a history and tell it in a way that I hope will resonate with readers and stick with them. Days of Dissent is a book that was heavily, heavily inspired by a book that came out in 2009 by the late Eduardo Galeano from Uruguay, who wrote this book called Mirrors, Stories of Almost Everyone. And what he did was even had less frontiers to work with. And it was a broader expanse of world history, and it was true world history. I think what I'm trying to do here is most of the histories that go outside of the borders of the United States, they have this ironic thing that they're entangled with U.S. imperialism. So if I am talking about Allende, there is a cultural invasion of U.S. and British music that that song movement is responding to, in addition to its politics, which are challenging the Washington Consensus. If I go to Africa and I'm talking about Kwame Nkrumah, that entangles itself with U.S. imperialism. And then, I think people should also, when they read this, they should see that when people from around the world do come into the U.S., even Europeans at some point in time in history, they're bringing with them political traditions, and some of those political traditions are radical traditions. And there was a time in the early 20th century where white politicians in the United States wanted to shut off the valve of European immigration because they thought too many of these Europeans coming over and finding themselves in working class jobs were bringing over the scourge of anarchist ideology with them, right, or radical worker ideology. So it might be interesting to some folks to see that, at one point in time, the U.S. wanted to stop European immigration from coming to the U.S. Because of the fear of those radical creeds coming through the border. But if you look at history back in that point in time, that's an extension of the Red Scare domestically.
I was going to say the specter of communism. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The Red Scare. Absolutely.
Yeah. So those are some of my favorite vignettes that immediately come to mind. I learned so much myself researching the book and writing and trying to find, the heart of every history. There's just some stories of resistance and violence that are just, that will stay with me. And that whole resonance is from me as a perspective of the writer. Fraser Baker, all he was trying to do was be a postmaster, and a white mob, basically wanted him out of their town in South Carolina, I believe. And, they came to his door and basically, killed him and some of his family members. And only very recently in the last few years did Congressman Clyburn basically champion a renaming of the post office in his memory. And so it's also putting a spotlight on history in the United States, not just in the historical journals or in classrooms at the universities, but what are institutions and buildings named after? Who are they named after? How are they remembered? And is there a marker? Is there an unmarked grave? Is there a marker that does stand, but basically calls an anti-Black pogrom a race riot? All of that is very, very important in terms of how we think of ourselves in this country and what our past and how the past informs our present.
I want to, based upon that, I want to skip forward a bit. I said I wanted to talk to you about Pacifica Radio and independent media. And this series, the seed of it began as commentaries you used to do at Pacifica when I was there with you. I think I was there with you at the same time.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. Now tell us about these commentaries you did.
So in 2008, I started to do a series called The Subversive Historian on a morning show I used to be co-producer of called Uprising. And we originally ran like a radical disdain history series from a youth media collective. I think it was called Radical Roots in New York City. And they were, basically doing that, but we could do it. We discussed on the show, me doing it in-house. I had just graduated from the university a few years ago at that time, and history was my major, and I actually came to Pacifica with the intention of public history versus broadcast journalism. I wanted to volunteer for the Pacifica Radio Archives and see what kind of job possibilities there were coming out of the university, because I wanted to see if my life would track towards public history and going back to school after, a year or two, and working with and basically being mesmerized by that collection of reels from programs of the past that captured the social movements of the day. But ultimately, I ended up being, a producer of the morning show. And so once I started to do these radio commentaries, it was 5 days a week. And basically, it was very much inspired by, the late people's historian, Howard Zinn, and finding something that happened on the day of the show. And at that point, I created my own music bed, recorded a topic and a commentary for a particular topic. And it was in a minute's time, which is not a lot of time. But, basically from the jump, I did it for about 2 years. And then with fund drives and other gaps in the calendar year, like I was building a manuscript and I knew it. And I told myself at some point in time in your life, if you fill in the blanks and do a complete calendar year, it might be a book that a publisher and the public might be interested in. And so basically I kept at it. But again, for 2 years after that, you start to exhaust when you're so attached to the calendar day. Your source material gets exhausted pretty quickly. So it's not something I could do for 10, 15 years, I don't think. I did it for 2 years. And then as time went on, I just felt like this book also gave me the opportunity to grow as a writer before I came back to complete that project. And I started off doing alternative journalism after Pacifica Radio, at OC Weekly. And when I got there, I really got my hands dirty. And actually that's, the Southern California histories in Days of Dissent reflect me as a historian at the local level, and me being most original in the work that I did. And then, it's just a matter of completing the manuscript at that point. But I felt that arriving now at this point in my career, it's a much more well-written book than if I had done it right after the series ended, in 2009, 2010, around that time. I don't think it would have been as compelling.
Yeah, the jump from independent media into mainstream media. You're now currently with the LA Times, correct?
Yes, the LA Times is my employer. I work for a vertical within that, so it's one that covers Orange County, and it's been an interesting balancing act. But
I'm
I
sure.
would say, I would say that unfortunately, a lot of those alternative models, it's just I've seen a lot of cratering in my life. Pacifica and the KPFK and 90.7 FM in LA, I think is down to just 12 employees. It has a staff of 12. And OC Weekly shuttered in 2019. I had a history long form story that was ready to go in February of 2020, but that didn't come to pass. And then essentially, the LA Times, as the legacy media institution and its verticals, they were able to essentially, a lot of people, reporters that I used to compete with on the beat, became my colleagues because it was just the only game in town in a lot of ways, and it was bringing in a lot of reporters, into the fold. But
Mhm.
then, you know, 2 years ago, it spit out a lot of those reporters,
Yeah.
and I was slated to be one of them. I was slated to be laid off in 2024, and in a sense, technically, I was laid off from the LA Times because I was a straight up Metro reporter for them at that point in time. But thanks to the union contract, speaking of unions and whatnot, I was able to hang on. And during that time, though, where they sat me on the sidelines and it was just an hourglass of sand until I was out of there, PM Press came through with a book contract for Days of Dissent. So I felt like, this is a way that I could take the skills that I've learned in my different lives in media and put them back to what's at the root of myself, which was, exemplified to a great deal at Pacifica Radio in terms of my idealism and my interest areas and the interest in history that I actually walked into that institution with in the first place.
Right, right, right. Good backstory on that. I didn't know, didn't have that backstory. We would see each other and we would talk at the station, but never really got into that backstory. So I appreciate that.
Hmm.
I'm still going to get to Isaac Woodard in a moment, or should I? No, I'm not going to get into Isaac Woodard. Those of you who are watching, you can either look him up or you can buy Gabriel's book and find out about Isaac Woodard. Yeah, I'm going to do that. No, I'm going to make you look it up. I used to hate when I would ask my mom something, look it up. Why can't you tell me? Nope, I'm no longer telling. But this is what I will do, though. I'm going to do something right now that I don't like to see other people do. Therefore,
Okay.
I don't like to do it either, but I'm going to do it this time. I want to ask you about something that is not in the book,
Okay.
i.e., how come you didn't put this in your book? I hate when people do that. Why ain't this in there? And you didn't do that. I hate when people do that. However, I think it's relative and substantial. One of the first things I looked for when I scanned through the book was the gasoline bath riots.
Mm.
Carmelita Torres.
Hmm.
Did not see that in the book. And I kind of feel like that's a glaring omission.
I mean, with
Any
my family
thoughts
being
on
from
that?
El Paso,
Sorry?
I said, especially with my family being from El Paso, as we discussed before, I became familiar with that history myself, not through family, but through the work of a historian, David Romo, who wrote a book when I was working as a producer at Pacifica called Ringside Seat to Revolution. And
Mhm.
this is my family. It goes back to my family history again. Um, when the Mexican Revolution was underway in 1910 and the years afterward, El Paso was just so situated on the border that people could get up on rooftops and just watch the battles go down.
Mm.
And my great grandmother, I believe, according to our family tradition history, that may have been a reason why she suffered a miscarriage because she was watching the Mexican Revolution go down from El Paso and across the border was Juarez, a major city. and an important city in the revolution. And the state of Chihuahua is where one protagonist in the book dies, a Mexican anarchist that ran with the Magonistas. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I did not include. And I mean, that's the thing. It's like 365 days. It's not, Gabriel San Roman's favorite histories of all time. That's the frontier. That's the frontier that I got to, that I'm abiding by in this format. It's a format buster, but there's a format that has its hooks in me. And so I did want to basically be as broad as I could with oppressed people's history. And there is some interesting Mexican and Chicano histories that are in the book that I was not educated about. So while the bath riots in Carmelita, Torres is not in there, and that's a famous story of where Mexicans were being blamed for an outbreak of lice, if I recall correctly. And when workers would cross through the international border, they would get sprayed down by the authorities there, and that chemical spray,
gasoline and kerosene.
One of those chemical sprays was later used in the Nazi death camps. So there's a connection there between the borderlands and the death camps of the Nazis. And so Carmelita, was one of the people that refused to get, deloused, if you will, by that chemical mixture. There's a very telling photograph that is part of David Romo's work, and it's part of the historical record, where a young, Mexican man in line crossing the border is just getting sprayed by those chemicals. And as the history turns out, Mexicans were not the source of the outbreak. It was actually more likely to be soldiers in the area, Fort Bliss is in the area. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the racist history of Texas. But I did learn about other episodes that were incredibly telling and filled in gaps in my own historical knowledge. One of the ones that comes to mind is the police murder of Santos Rodriguez in Dallas. And it was basically an instance where, and this is in the 70s, two brothers who were young, were not, they weren't even teenagers, were accused of stealing from a vending machine at a gas station. And so the two officers went to their homes, and they were asleep in their pajamas. And their legal guardian gave permission for the police to enter the home, but that legal guardian spoke broken English at best. So if he really understood, what was happening, it's not clear. So they took the two young boys, Santos included, back to the quote unquote scene of the crime, that gas station. And one of the officers, in the course of an interrogation, basically, spun the chamber of his revolver around and said, "You're going to tell the truth this time, right?" Click. Nothing happened the first time, and he's pleaded his innocence. Santos did. And the second time, there was a fatal shot.
There was no third time. Yeah.
There was no third time.
Yeah, there was no third time.
So the Chicanos in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, they marched on City Hall, and it became a very contentious protest. And you'll see, photographs when you look into that history of a police motorcycle in flames. And it took decades before, even though that cop was convicted, was sentenced to 5 years, served half of that term. Who could call that justice, right? It took the city of Dallas decades before they formally apologized for the murder of Santos Rodriguez. But yeah, I mean, there's those kind of histories. There's history of Mexican cannery workers on strike. Another favorite of mine is Emma Tenayuca in San Antonio, leading the pecan sheller strike, which was a very important labor strike, in the 1930s. And so, and I think an incomplete part of understanding Chicano history is when you look at Ludlow, when you look at the Columbine Mine Massacre, the Ludlow Massacre, a lot of those miners were Mexican. And there's an episode in the book about a shooting of another police shooting in Walsenburg, Colorado, which is southern Colorado. The IWW office, the Industrial Workers of the World office, was shot up in a fracas meant to break up a stronghold of the union during a coal miner strike, and one of the miners was killed, and a young bystander, was also killed in the gunfire. And in a rarity, the official explanation was that the police were at fault for the deaths, but that's about as far as it got. It's not as if there was going to be a trial or a conviction. One of the most frustrating part about confronting the history in the book is that there is an extreme level of impunity for the violence committed against indigenous peoples, against Black people and Chicano peoples. There's just never really a story where that isn't the case.
And the book, again, where I'm speaking with Gabriel San Roman, who is an award-winning journalist, an author. He has investigated political corruption as a reporter for the LA Times, the Orange County Weekly, written long-form histories for them, and voiced the Subversive Historian radio series on Pacifica Radio, which was the seed or spark for this book, The Dissent, 365 Days of Dissent. The book is very accessible, and the chapters or the pages are very, very short, dealing with every day, January 1st through December 31st, looking at something that has happened somewhere in the world, not just in the U.S., something around the issue of rebellion or resistance or dissent. So it's very accessible. It is not laden with a lot of academic jargon, thank God. Thank you.
That was very intentional, if I could talk about that for a moment.
Absolutely. I'm going to come back to one other thing I didn't see in the book, but yes, go right ahead.
Okay. But no, I mean, obviously, reworking, retooling radio commentaries or starting from scratch in the gaps of the coverage. Really, what I wanted to do was get away from that academic jargon, which, basically permeates so much about how we talk about, resistance and everything. And that was intentional because, one, I think, I'm not anti-intellectual, but I do think that this language that's created in the ivory towers divorces itself from the people it's studying, talking about, and trying to examine and analyze and all of that. So for me as a writer, got to get away from all of that. Right. And then two, if I want to connect with the readers and have this resonance be part of the experience of the book, academic jargon is not going to get me there. Academic jargon is going to be an obstacle to that. And I think people in the left should take a look at that, because it's definitely an issue going forward about how we express ourselves. And I understand that since the radio series, the world of communication has changed. When I started at Pacifica Radio, the soundbite was the enemy of journalism. Broadcast journalism, give you a soundbite, why not a long form, full hour episode interview with a book author, or an in-depth 18-minute interview with someone on an issue. A soundbite. But the way that social media has basically taken over a lot of our spaces where we speak on issues, if you're on Twitter or X now and Blue Sky, and you have a finite amount of characters, which is, good and bad. But then also on Instagram and these other platforms, TikTok, it's all sound bites. It's all soundbite driven. So, I mean, I'm guilty. I'm creating these reels on history, and they don't give me a lot of room to breathe, but I'm also doing it from the work that I'm sourcing it from the research and work that I've done personally to kind of bring that to people. But everyone's attention span has kind of, taken a hit from social media. And I already have gotten positive reinforcement that people that are either too busy, if they're not, ADHD, or they think they might have that diagnosis, like they actually express how this is a book they can work with.
You can get in, get out.
Yeah, you can start wherever you want. You can come
Mhm.
back to it multiple times. And I mean, the book's out in the wild today.
And for those who do like a lot of reading, you have footnotes, you have endnotes. So hey,
Yeah. If you find something that really piques your interest, there's footnotes and reference page to delve deeper into the history. But I think that
yeah.
I think the merits of this approach really speak to what has happened to people's attention spans. We see, we see statistically how much readership is in decline. But I still want to say, like, even though that's the case, and though this may be an accessible way to reach people about episodic people's histories, my hope is that this approach works. My hope is that this is a way, not only in the forms of discussion, but it's also a way for histories to interlock and converse with each other where they may not otherwise have an opportunity. I tried to create a real patchwork quilt that took a lot of history from a lot of different places, and insofar as they're in communication with each other, we can learn about each other. And I've had conversations with I've had conversations with people that more knowledgeable in terms of this part of history, but not that part. And so it's episodic for sure, and it's a different approach than I typically would take for a historical subject like Vincent Emos and any other work that I've done before. But let's see. I mean, I'm as curious as anyone else to see if this approach actually connects with people and reaches them where they're at and doesn't distance themselves. Like, these stories will not distance themselves from the reader with a language that makes me want to feel vaunted in some sort of intellectual pillar. like I've got this secret knowledge and I have to express it. I'm trying to reach people. I'm trying to see if this is a way that really connects. So that's a big question for the book going forward.
Okay. Now, the other thing that I thought was missing from your book, and when I say missing from the book, I was like, this should be included. If we're talking about resistance, a day of resistance, a day of rebellion. Not that that's a reason to diss the book, but just wanted to bring it to your attention and possibly have you talk about it. You mentioned that you have Southern California history in the book, but I didn't see anything about 41st and Central, when the LAPD's SWAT team attacked the Southern California Black Panther Party for over 5 hours, December 8th, 1969. Now, you mentioned the murders of Bunchy and John at UCLA, January 17th, 1969, but there's nothing about, I think you even mentioned Fred Hampton and his murder, December 4th, 1969, but nothing 4 days later about here in Los Angeles. I am so hurt by that, Gabriel.
I'm sorry. I mean, one thing I want to do is not disappoint people. I'm a people pleaser. I'm at the heart of it. But there is Panther history, little Bobby Hutton and Fred Hampton, as you mentioned. Interestingly enough, Campbell Hall was just rejected recently in terms of an effort to rename it for Bunchy and John. And I did put in the history that was less known, June 4th, 1969, where there was a branch of the Black Panther Party in Santa Ana, which is in Orange County. Because I felt when I was a person of color working at an alternative weekly, I'm like, how has this newspaper been around for almost a quarter century and nobody's done a deep dive into this murder trial, into the Black Panther history where it concerns Santa Ana? Because there is a very deeply historically rooted community at that time of Black folks in the south of the city. And so if I had more space and time, I definitely think that's such an illustrative moment and everything. And I've written about it elsewhere in Truth Out in an interview with Elaine Brown. But it does, if I had a greater opportunity to hit on all the histories that Tandy wants to see, Definitely, I would have expanded upon it further because the Santa Ana branch connects to that day. There was a Panther by the name of Daniel Michael Lynham, who was originally pegged for the murder of a police officer in Santa Ana, Nelson Sasser. That murder trial basically dismantled the small branch that existed there in Santa Ana. But he went up to the LA Panthers, and the day before the shootout at 41st, he left the party. And that was seen as very suspicious at the time. And people were outside of his home in Santa Ana because he wasn't there. And then the next day, there's this 5-hour shootout, like you mentioned. But of course, that is an important history because what we see on the nightly news on occasion in Southern California and elsewhere is this word called, or this acronym called SWAT, and that goes right back to the history.
Television show on SWAT.
Mhm.
2 iterations of it. Yeah.
Isn't it the case that the badge has the 41st and Central on it? Yeah.
There's a patch. I don't think that they actually wear it on their uniforms, but it is available for law enforcement and I guess enthusiasts to purchase. And it has 54 and 41 on the patch. 41 symbolizing the first major engagement of SWAT at 41st and Central against the Black Panther Party, and 54 being 54th Street, where the SWAT team was unleashed against the Symbionese Liberation Army, effectively incinerating people inside of a house on 54th Street.
Yeah. So I mean, again, if I got to, maybe I'll come back to this format somewhere down the line. Again, Galliano was
second edition.
Second edition, absolutely. But there's so much. I mean, that's the thing. There's so much history out there, and I do kind of put a caveat in my introduction, and where I say, history is built on interpretations from previous scholars and researchers and writers, and those interpretations are looked at by new generations and improved upon, or at least that should be the dialectic at play. So I'm not immune to this. This is not a pristine book. It overlooks, in my opinion, a lot of disability history that I could have included more of. I'm sure there's other more shortcomings in terms of the balance of the book. But for the United States, I felt like the emphasis that editorially that I chose the episodes that I did, I tried to basically hit on all bases as much as possible.
And you covered so many bases, but I just wanted to mention those two. But also thank you for covering the Orange County branch of the Black Panther Party, because as you said, that is a very little known story, incident. And I don't know if you were able to talk with one of the people involved in that, a man by the name of Arthur. We call him Thug, and he's still alive. He's in the Bay Area, still doing community work.
I did talk to him in 2009. It was a 20-minute conversation, mostly off the record. So basically, what was said is that he was convicted of second-degree murder, which shows how weak the case was, because this is Orange County in the late 60s, and you're talking about an officer, who was killed in the 3rd and Raitt Street in Santa Ana. So I'm pretty sure they didn't want that second degree. They wanted something stiffer and something longer than 7 years. But that being said, as I reported in the long form history, he maintained an innocence of the crime, and so journalistically, that's a story that showed that local history has a power to the people around it. So the Black community is not the same in terms of the size, although the spiritual heart of the Black community in Orange County is still there in Santa Ana. It's where Juneteenth celebrations are. They did move the parade for Black History Month. But really, that is the heart of the history of the county for the Black population, which has never been more than 2% historically into the current time. So what people did with that history is the activists, the contemporary activists who are more Latino and Chicano in the community, is the park that was named for Nelson Sasser and still is in downtown Santa Ana. They kind of unofficially rechristened it as Black Panther Park. So people pay attention to history, and there is something to be said about local history and the power to see these bigger picture ideas and know that there was protagonists down your block, or in your city. So the Southern California histories are very near and dear to me because of that. And yeah, I mean, I think they're some of the strongest vignettes in the book.
Gabriel San Roman, thank you so much. Congratulations on this newest book regarding 365 Days of Dissent, rebellions, revolts. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with me on Rootwork today.
Thank you. I was glad to be here.
Appreciate you. Microphone muted. Text spicy. That was my comrade Gabriel San Roman talking about his newest book on 365 Days of Dissent. And a couple of notes that I wanted to go over real quick. Yes, Orange County does include Irvine. Orange County is the county right next to, immediately south of Los Angeles. In World War II, after quote unquote communism had taken over certain parts of the country of Europe, Winston Churchill made this statement that an iron curtain has descended over Europe, something like that. So they would always refer to the Iron Curtain. They'd be talking about Russia, East Germany, etc. So a lot of folks out here would refer to, I remember, Orange County would always be referred to as the Orange Curtain. Even though there was and is a black community, black population out that way. Disneyland is located in Orange County. Knott's Berry Farm, these amusement parks. Anaheim is home to the California Angels. Santa Ana is the county seat. I'm not sure what's in Santa Ana, but Anaheim, Buena Park, Irvine, University of California, Irvine. So there are black folks there, but I'm up in LA County, South Central LA to be exact. I always heard it referred to as the Orange Curtain. If you didn't need to go to Orange County, I won't say it was a sundown town. I don't remember hearing it as a sundown town. But if you didn't need to go that way, you didn't go out that way. Like I said, we would go there because we're going to Disneyland or some of these other amusement parks, but we didn't hang out. And I don't remember. I think I may have had a cousin that lived out there. I think it was only one cousin. It's not like, we didn't hang out in Orange County. We didn't hang out there. So it's predominantly white, still predominantly white, but there are pockets of a lot of brown folks out there where there have been numerous instances of police violence against Latinos, brown folks out in Orange County. A lot of ICE activity. But as far as black folks are concerned, it's never been major. Now, what he referred to was there was an Orange County chapter of the Black Panther Party, and there was a police shooting. A police officer was killed in 1969. One of the brothers who did time for that, brother, we called him Thug. His name was Arthur. They called him Thug. He's up in the Bay Area now. Shout out to Thug. But yeah, he was able to get off. Second-degree manslaughter. I don't know the details of the case. It was written about somewhere. I don't have the link at the moment, but again, that was in Orange County. Real quick, what did I do with it? Hold on one second for me, y'all. I said I wasn't going to. Shucks. Yeah, I had said I wasn't going to talk about Isaac Woodard I didn't talk about Isaac Woodard, but I'm going to go ahead on and say this about Isaac Woodard. This is a very, very haunting photograph. And this is why I already knew who Isaac Woodard was. You can look on YouTube, PBS, and other instances. I even saw a video said that it was on Facebook. Isaac Woodard was a World War II veteran who came home. I don't remember if it was Alabama or Mississippi. Sound like something Mississippi would do. But somewhere in the South, he was in his uniform. He was on a bus, argued with a bus driver. This is during segregation, of course. You don't move to the back. You get into an argument with the bus driver, they call the police. No hesitation. When he gets to the jail, he's arguing with the jailers. They beat him. They use a baton and they stick it in his eyes and they blind him. And this is the photograph. His eyes are now sunken in because they were destroyed by this beating that the sheriff had given him. A haunting photograph. I cannot, do not, will not want to imagine the pain that this man must have endured. The brutality and the barbarity of these people knows no end. I'm going to hush now before something else happens. So yeah, this is Isaac Woodard. His story is one of the ones that Gabriel talked about in the 365 Days of Dissent. Other thing I wanted to mention real quick. I'm out here in Los Angeles, California, South Central LA, but Los Angeles nonetheless. I know where I am. I am in Upper Mexico. I'm very, very clear about that. I know that. It's also Tongva land before the Spaniards colonized it. I'm clear on where I'm at. My neighborhood, I've lived in my neighborhood all my life. Inner city high school, bused for a minute to West LA, got up out of that. But junior college, whatever. I've been around Latino people. It's hard to escape them, right? Chicanos, Latinos, Mexicanos, Nicaraguans, El Salvadorans, we got them all out here. But I never studied Mexican American, Chicano, Latino history. You pick up things if you are observant, if you sharp, you can pick things up. But I've never systematically studied Chicano history like I should. What's your point, Tiny? My point is, I was a grown ass woman, as in about 6 years ago, 2020. I'm taking a class. This is an anthropology class. It's not even cultural anthropology. It's regular anthropology 101. But the professor in that class was on some other stuff, as in he would include Iceman inheritance as part of the reading. It was in this class 5-6 years ago. Like I said, I'm a grown ass woman at this point, that I hear about that he plays a movie in class, Gasoline Baths. It's available on YouTube. Gasoline Baths. This is the incident. Well, there's an incident related to that's what I was talking about with Gabriel. If you have never seen Gasoline Baths, you need to see that movie. It's only about 15 minutes long. Maybe not a movie, documentary, news report. It's only about 15 minutes. These people and when I say these people, I know y'all know who I'm talking about, right? They actually sprayed gasoline and kerosene on Mexican workers coming over from the border. I have not researched what the fallout from that has been in terms of cancer and other illnesses. But this one young sister, I think she was 17, her name was Carmelita Torres. This happened in January of, I believe it was January of 1917. Y'all look it up. Gasoline Baths. I think it was January of 1917. Carmelita Torres, she organized a revolt because a fire took place. Duh, a fire took place in the barracks in the area where they were having the Mexican workers live. Close to 30 people died because of that fire, because of that damn chemical that they had stored and sprayed on these people. And I don't know if you caught the Remix morning show this morning, but if you've been paying attention to the news, you know that there's another fire currently happening in East Los Angeles in a place called Boyle Heights. Boyle Heights has historically been the epicenter of the Mexicano Chicano community in Los Angeles, in East Los Angeles. A large company, which a refrigeration company, Refrigeration Cold, has now caught on fire. One of the things that the fire has been flaring up for over 5 days now. They cannot put it out. One of the reasons why they said they couldn't put it out is because the structural integrity of the building is such that the firefighters cannot go inside to fight the fire. They're afraid the walls and the roof may cave in on them. So it's a toxic mixture. It's a cloud cover over East LA. The winds have been blowing it into other parts, north and slightly to the west. It hasn't made it out here in South Central LA yet, but people have been talking about the air pollution, wearing masks inside their house, close your windows. And now they're saying, because this was a place housing, storing refrigerated meat, they're saying a possible biohazard is about to happen because all of this meat is going to spoil, if it hasn't spoiled already. The governor, Gavin Newsom, has declared a state of emergency so that more resources, such as firefighters from elsewhere, can come in and help to fight this fire. So it's not always about dry brush. And when we talk about fire season, dry brush, somebody flicks a cigarette in Malibu or Palisades, or a power line sparks some brush that wasn't cleared away. These industrial plants that are in residential neighborhoods or close to residential neighborhoods are toxic epicenters for Black and brown communities. So LA got a lot going on, which is why you need 365 days of dissent, days of revolt, days of resistance, and rebel histories and strikes. You need that sort of thing, right? Real quick. My cousins grew up in Irvine, moved there in the mid-70s. Yeah, well, there are places you can go in Los Angeles County if you're trying to escape the hood. And then some folks just move out of LA County. Like I said, Orange County was the next county over. Very, very white. As a matter of fact, I think it was Higher Learning. John Singleton's film. He may have referred to that enclave of white students that came from Orange County. I think he called them Disneyland. Some people have called Orange County Wonder Bread, white bread. So yeah, that gives you an idea of how it is perceived out that way. Right. So check out Gasoline Bass. Get more information on Isaac Woodard and his story. Check out Gabriel's book. Check out my books while you at it. It is 6:10 p.m. Y'all know what that means. I ain't going to be up here running my mouth all night with y'all. Next week, again, it should be a live show. I'm talking with Dr. Kendra McCrae about her book, Essential Soldiers, talking about looking at women activists in Black Power movement organizations. So this should be a good dialogue between the two of us. Thank you again so much for hanging out with me today. Please like, share, and subscribe. Like the video, even though I tell you what, I hear you. You know what? Yeah. Let's take Brother Isaac off the screen. Oh, such a haunting image. Like the show, even though it's rough. Give me a like. Please share the link. Please subscribe to Black Liberation Media. And if you haven't, subscribe to Rootwork also. Continue to support us. Become a member either here on YouTube or on Patreon of Black Liberation Media. You can also show some love. Like, brother, man, I'm so sorry, bro. I was running my mouth. What happened? Who was it? I don't want to call you a dork, but thank you, dork. $4.99. You can show your support that way. You can also holler at a sister with the not the Patreon. Yes, the Patreon for Black Liberation Media, but the Cash App and the Venmo is right down there in the bottom. So yeah, appreciate y'all. Thank you again for hanging out. Y'all stay safe. Take care. And I will catch y'all on the next one. The name of, I don't know if that's the actual name of the documentary, but it's regarding gasoline baths. Trust me, just put in gasoline baths in Google in quotation marks, and you'll see everything that you need to see in terms of stories, commentary, and videos on that phenomenon of the gasoline baths. All right, y'all. I'm out of here. Peace.
Nothing in Deborah Jones's formative years could have prepared her for life in the US organization. Like many of her generation, she was Black and proud before the phrase became popular. She believed, and still believes, in the principles for which the organization stood. But her life took a horrific turn on Mother's Day 1970, leaving her in trauma and in silence. In this never-before-told account, Deborah Jones's inspiring story is told. What We Stood For: The Story of a Revolutionary Black Woman, by Deborah Jones and Tandisizwe Shimaringa, is the compelling and harrowing memoir of one woman's experiences in a leading Black Power organization.
Black Liberation Media is a collective of Black and African organizers, journalists, academics, and media personalities serving Black and African masses seeking to further grow in their understanding of themselves, their histories, and the African world through entertainment and news. Please continue to like, subscribe, and donate to the channel so we can further serve you and liberate our people. You can also go to blkliberationmedia.org, get some merchandise, and also become a Patreon member and a member from the YouTube. Please do what you can, share, and show your love as we will show ours for you. Black Liberation Media.